All right, so welcome back, and I'm jumping straight back into the consensus folder of the Geth code base. So we've got ourselves back into Geth, and we were previously looking at how the consensus verifyHeaders gets called. And I was just trying to dig through the functions, really trying to find how it got called. But unfortunately, probably the interesting one that I wanted to find was where you are running a node and the peer-to-peer network sends through a block, like a new block has come through. And then that is when you've probably at that point want to call verifyHeader to test this new block that you've received. And I wasn't really able to find it. And it's probably because it's buried in the peer-to-peer layer, and the peer-to-peer layer is probably handling something and chucking it into a channel of some form. And it probably is actually like a good segue into investigating the peer-to-peer layer, which I probably will start doing next. But I think that's a big folder with a lot of stuff going on in it. But what I didn't do is, while I was in the consensus folder, we went through it, and there wasn't too much in this ETH hash, which is a proof of work one. Click is uninteresting and related to testing, and if you're running your own private blockchain, maybe. It seems uninteresting. But ETH hash is where the proof of work is, and in here there isn't actually that much going on. It's really they've defined this ETH hash structure, which is primarily this verifyHeaders function. So it's the blockchain maintains this ETH hash as its engine under its blockchain struct. And then all this stuff is sort of related to just being able to use it. So the API is just locking it in, so when you want to make calls from the network or just access it's really just boilerplate. Algorithm related to how the actually, let's get some of these open. It was I've slightly forgotten actually. It's purely related to how that caching, when you are doing your proof of work SHA-SUM, the hashing, and it built this big buffer here with these numbers. So it is really just defining how you call that hash sum over it. And it's kind of uninteresting because it's just kind of well, for all intents and purposes, you're just calling a hash over it. It's got its unique structure where it uses more memory, but it's not really that interesting. So that folder is just uninteresting. It's this is how we call that hash over the block. API is just boilerplate. Consensus is the main one where we define verifyHeader. Difficulty is kind of interesting because it's where the time bomb's set, and when because the difficulty kind of is adjusted over time depending on how the hash rate's going, but also adjusts depending on this time bomb that goes on. ETH hash is just structure definitions, and sealer is when you when you've got a block mined, you've got the block and you're going through each nonce trying to find the mined the winner, and when you do find it, it is calling it sealing the block, and that's before you submit it. So it's kind of just giving definitions of begin miner and stuff. So really, in all, it's kind of there's some slightly interesting things going on, but ETH hash with this verifyHeader is probably only the important thing. And I didn't actually go through it, which is kind of what I wanted to do, which shouldn't take too long because there's not that much going on in here. So we've got verify uncles, which I think is going to be uninteresting. We've got a verifyHeader here, which is lowercase. So this is probably the internal one we want to look at. Calculate difficulty helps with that time bomb stuff, so that's not something we want to dig into anyway. more difficulty calculation stuff. More difficulty. Cool. So we can pretty much like, don't want to dig into that. Although it would be probably interesting in math, but I think it'd probably be more like sit down with a pencil and paper than go through code. Because it's kind of one of those things, you define the function as a math equation and then you just implement it. And then when you look at the code, it looks like a mess because it's got all this like subtraction, exponential, add and stuff, and it looks messy, but really it's just like it's probably like a one-liner if you found a math equation for it. So anyway, let's ignore all that and go up to these verify headers and just sort of go through that one. What does this consensus do when it receives a block? Like, what is it checking? And it's probably going to be like common sense stuff. It's just like, is this block number after the one that we've already got? See yellow paper section 4.3.4. Let's get that open actually. So it was 4.3.4, the block. And there's 4.3 transaction receipts, block header validity. We define P block header to be the parent block of it. So it's got to be sequential. So parent block plus 1 has to be the headers block. Common sense. They've defined the difficulty here, which is fun, whatever. Let's not dig into that. But this is where I'm kind of saying it's a math thing, not a code thing. And then all these different settings for K, for the difficulty. Difficulty, uninteresting. The canonical gas limit of the header must fulfill the relation headers must be less than the parent headers #1 plus this to the power of this minus that. Cool, so we've got some definitions to how much gas can be contained in a block. So it's like a total amount of all the like Ethereum virtual like definitions and calls and stuff all added together. Yeah, another common sense one. The timestamp of this header must be later than the timestamp of the parent's one. And this is something they sort of say it's like pretty important that they establish that a time period exists. The nonce must be this must be less than or equal to 2 to the 56 divided by a difficulty raised to the power of m. Actually, I don't think that's raised to the power. I'm not sure what that means. Where header H crossed out, what's that? Nonce crossed is the new block's header but without the nonce and mixed hash. So it's like before it's sealed. Fun. And lastly, our validity function is just all of them. Oh, it's an and. It's this and. Cool. So let's just go through this in the code and see if we can find it. They've got some like function redirection going on here. So it's kind of like this verify uncles has a capital V, therefore it's like a publicly available thing in Go. That's a Go specific thing. And this one's like a lowercase one, therefore it's only available to this ETH hash, like a private function to ethash is the only one who can call it. So if we go through verify header worker, so that's just allowing us to have some threading going for it. Verify headers plural, verify header singular. Cool. So I'm going to assume that we're going to get this verify headers is like the entry point, or verify header singular. So this would probably be if you receive a bulk amount of blocks through syncing, and this is probably why the worker exists. So it's like down here, verify header workers. We can set up multiple threads checking all these blocks that come in if they come in bulk, whereas that might not be necessary if we're just receiving a single block. So it's like a single block comes in, we call verify header. A bunch, like a batch of blocks comes in due to syncing, we call this, and then we send them off through workers, and then we call this verify header internal. And if I think I find yeah, so verify headers calls out verify header worker, and verify header worker calls verify header lowercase. Whereas this top verify header capital, so publicly available, just calls it directly. So we've got our 4, we've got 1. If we can kind of see like function 1 here, when we receive a single block from peer-to-peer. Verify headers when we're syncing. Verify header workers makes this batch syncing faster due to threading. And then verify uncles is unrelated. It's going to be very similar. I think you're checking headers of a block, but uncles are kind of like late mined ones. So you still pull in the people who didn't win the block, but you get their information. Don't want to dive into that too much. But then this one is verify header, and this is where the meat is going to be. So let's just work through it from this this capital verify header, so the publicly available one. So we start off full mode fake. So this is testing stuff. They're just saying if we have fake stuff, we look at our config file, and if we're running fake stuff, just return nil. So no errors. So this returns an error. And then that error is just going to be if there is something wrong with that header, it'll be what's wrong with the header. So we start off, if we're faking stuff because we're testing, we just ignore it. Second, comment here, short circuit if the header is known or parent is not. So header, number, and return that as an unsigned integer. And this number, it actually took me a little bit, I had to Google it, but it's just height. So the first block you have is number 1, second block you have is number 2. And that's what we're just checking is sequential in our blockchain. So we pull that, we go to our header, find what they've defined as the number, and then we go into our chain that we've got ourselves, search get header using our header hash. So that we've received a header, it's got a hash and it's got a number on it, and we're just feeding them into this get header. And if that returns anything, if it's not nil, we return nil. So we just get out of the function. If we've already got this exact header, we want to jump out of it real quick. That's what's happening here. So it's come in, it found that we've already got this exact header and just chucks out of it straight away. Parent chain.get header. So right here is we look at our parent. So we go to the header, we find the parent hash, and then we go find in our chain that parent exists. And that parent exists with a number being 1 less than a number. So if we've received block 2, we want to go find block 1 and make sure that the hash of that block 1 is what is said in its header and also the number matches up. And we search it in our chain, and if it doesn't exist, so we get nothing back from that search, we return this unknown ancestor error. So that's literally just saying like, hey, if you've said you've got a parent and we can't find it, and or that number is not +1 to like what we're thinking, is straight away kicked out. And I guess that's where they say sanity checks here. These are like very quick. Like if these fail, there's something like massively wrong with the block that you've received. So it just like boot it out, do nothing, don't waste any cycles. So we now go verify header to the meat here. So first thing we do, ensure that the header's extra data section is of reasonable size. So I guess we've got, in our header, we've got extra data. I mean, it makes sense, but does this say anything about it? An arbitrary bytes array containing data. This must be 32 bytes or fewer. HX for extra. Cool. So we make sure the length of the header extra. So we go to that 32 bytes and we checked that it is greater than our maximum extra data size. If it is, we return an error saying extra data is too long. Maximum extra data size. See if we can find that. Is that going to be super easy to search through? We already know it's 32, but there it is. 32 bytes. Params, protocol params. And 26. So maximum, here we go, some probably interesting definitions that we'll want here. Yeah, 32 bytes as defined by the white paper. Nice. Nothing scary comes up when you can't find that. Anyway, so cool, 32 bytes or less for the header. If not uncle. So this uncle is a boolean passed in. So in our first engine, we pass false in 1, 2, 3, 4. So that's always going to be false in 1, 2, 3, 4. Yeah, cool. So this should always be false for a block coming in. However, that verify uncle function that's probably just here calls verify header anyway. So it does some similar things plus some extra stuff, and then passes it back to verify header anyway. But then it passes true in 1, 2, 3, 4. So first thing it does, if the header time is greater than allowed future block timestamps. Allowed future block time seconds. Future block. I don't really want to dig into this uncle thing, but I think it's just saying that like if you send an uncle and it's like a year after like the blocks occurred, you shouldn't be able to do it because it's just like you're mining stuff and it's been unreasonably slow, and like yeah, you won the block, but you shouldn't get any rewards after like If you miss it by like 5 minutes, probably fine. If you miss it by like a year, nah, too bad, man. Like you lost out. You don't get any of these coins that uncles get for it. So first sanity check after this, here we go. Header time is less than parent's time. Easy. So we've got a parent and a header, and they are both types header, I guess. So we look at the times and we make sure the header is, if it is less than the parent's time, we say that we return an error. Then we do our calculate difficulty here, and we say we expect the difficulty to be this. I'm assuming it's a integer of some form. And then we look at our header, comparing what we got from this calculated difficulty to our header's difficulty, and if they are not the same, we return an error. So if we receive a block, we should all be on the same difficulty. We should be calculating the exact same thing. So, great fun. Hard-coded gas limit here. Less than 2 to the 63 minus 1. The gas limit is greater than the cap. Did we have a gas limit here? The canonical difficulty, timestamp. The canonical gas limit must be filled relation. Okay, so that doesn't look like what we're looking at right now. Yet. So in the header we define a gas limit. We know that it must be this upper limit here, less than an upper limit. And then we look at the gas that's been used. And these are all just defined in, we're just looking at the header. I don't know if it actually goes through the transactions and verifies the gas in each transaction versus what's this one. So we make sure the header gas used is less than the gas limit. If it is greater, then we return an error. Here is some London hard fork magic going on. They're defining a base fee. I do not understand the base fee yet, and I haven't seen it on like anything yet. So I don't think I want to dig into that, because that will be a learn London when it comes out. Verify the headers 1559 attributes. If chain.config is not London, we make sure that the base fee doesn't exist, and we verify the gas limit. So verify gas limit. That's going to be in that MISC, isn't it? There's a gas limit there. So verify gas limit. So the difference between the parents and ours, if the difference is less than 0. So it's an absolute value of the parent's gas limit divided by the parameter's gas limit bound divisor. It's going to be 128. Divisor 1024, which is that number. So we've got this ratio. Okay, that's less of an interesting formula than I thought. So you got your parent's gas limit divided by 1024, and your hash limit can only be plus or minus that. So 1/24. You can only go up or down 1/24, and that's what your gas limit of the header must be. And it must be greater than 5,000. Cool. So that doesn't, there's not much else in this file, is there? So less than 5,000, min gas limit's probably in there as well. And you have to be plus or minus that ratio on top of what the parent's limit is. Parents? Yeah, parents plus or minus this ratio. Uninteresting. So we've got this verify the gas limit is within that parents over 1024. Verify that the block number is parents plus 1. Interesting. So this is where they check that it's plus 1. Up above in the capital verify header, it wasn't actually checking it was plus 1. It was just checking that the parent existed in our database. Verify seal. So that's our seal. Verify seal. Wait, it's not in here. CD consensus. Verify seal. Predefined. It is in consensus. Right down the bottom, okay. So we've received a block, we're checking that the nonce is right, I guess, in here. Yeah, if we got some fakes, we return not much. If eth_hash.shared, shared proof of work, delegate verification to it. Not sure what shared means here. Possibly that something else is doing the calculation. Sure, we have a valid difficulty. The difficulty needs to be less than 0. Header difficulty sign must be less than or equal to 0. I don't understand that. Again, I don't really want to delve into difficulty though. Seems like you just look at it. Fast but heavy proof of work verification was requested using eth_hash dataset. For slow but light. So you get your dataset from those datas we looked at before. We calculate Hashimoto full using that, and the nonce that was in the header. So we generate our result. And then down here, I guess, do we ignore the result? If new set bytes compare target is greater than 0. So if we say we make a new integer, which I'm guessing is set to 0, then we set the bytes of the result and we compare it to our target. And it should be greater than 0. What does compare do? If it's 0, it's equal. If it's minus, it's less than, isn't it? So we get our target out of our Hashimoto call and we get a digest because we're putting in the nonce that they've given us and we do the calculation ourselves, like the hash ourselves. We do it once. They've done it hundreds of times to get this nonce. We just do it once. So we do that, we get a result. we check down here that result is less than our difficulty, which is verifying what the header is. So we've checked the header previously to make sure its difficulty was high enough. And now we look at this result and make sure it's lower than that difficulty. And then this digest should also be stored in the block. So we need to look at header mixed digest and look at this versus what we calculated a digest to be. Cool. So that is literally just recalculating the hash and make sure the nonce is right. So I think we're back here in, yep, I verify header. So we go into here, we look at the verify seal function, and that tells us if nonce is right and also if the difficulty, not difficulty, there is a, in the block, we have a nonce. And we have, what were they looking at? The digest? The block has a digest? Complete header mixed digest. Maybe this? Mix hash is the same as that mixed digest. Okay, cool. So that's just an extra proof for it. I don't fully understand why that needs to be in the header. Let's do a quick Google. Why does mix hash need to be in header? Here we go. The mix hash is actually calculated from nonce as an intermediate value in calculating a proof of work. So you might be able to DDoS a node by sending incorrect nonces. So you give a lightweight pre-validation. Interesting. So does that... Do we do anything with that digest up here? Digest. Calculate it, we calculate it. Not that I can see. Is there anywhere up here? I can't see where they're checking it. Digest. You sure, mate? Do we have a link? GitHub Ethereum Wiki Ethash. I can't see it. Oh well, unimportant. I'm going to assume it's implemented correctly because I am still learning this. Where were we? So, calculate difficulty, gas limit, is London, block number is parents plus 1, verify that its nonsense stuff is right, verify DAO header extra data, verify 4 caches. So this is probably where they've hard-coded up misc forks. They've hard-coded bad blocks. Verifies that blocks conforming to network hard forks do have correct hashes. So they're hard coding all the hard forks hashes into the code base. And in this DAO, they hard coded the bad hash, which allowed them to hack. So it is saying that these shouldn't be allowed to be in those hashes. And I don't particularly care about how those are implemented, because it's just going to be verify that it's not that. Yes, no. Return nil. And that's the end of that. So there isn't actually that much into it. So I think I might call it there. Like, have this one as a quick one, because I am a bit sad that I didn't get to dig into where this verify header comes in. But I think it's probably a peer-to-peer layer. And I think that peer-to-peer sort of like folder we've got needs to be investigated of its own. Because if we look at it, it's quite big. Some of these files are 31 kilobytes. That's probably where the meat is. And that dial, 16 kilobytes. So I think all that stuff I want to go through, and it will probably fall out the end of it by like when we sort of figure out what the codes are, and we receive a message from the peer-to-peer network, and one of them is going to be, this is the code for received a block. And that will probably add it to some channel, and then we'll know what channel we need to look at. But I think I might leave it there and say we'll dig into that later. Anyway, thanks all for watching.